You're listening to Marketing News Canada, Canada's #1 show featuring the brightest minds in marketing, PR, and digital advertising.
Brought to you by Canada Post.
Thanks everyone for joining us on another week of Marketing Jam. Of course, huge thank you to Canada Post for being amazing supporters of the show. If you haven't subscribed yet to Insight Magazine, I love it. Today's guest loves it. Again, how often do you get a physical, tangible, touch, feel, smell magazine delivered to your office? And again, full of insights, full of ideas. I personally jump right to the case studies. I then am always so curious about what the texture on the cover is going to be because they do something new every time. And this one, for those of you who are into doing crafts, actually turns the magazine cover into a smartphone speaker, which is pretty amazing. So, yeah, good for them. Good for them. Well, without further ado, Sonia, thank you for being on the show today.
Well, thanks for having me today.
Yeah. So tell me about the organization that you represent. There's an acronym and there's a full name for it. Tell us what those are.
Yeah, so IAB Canada stands for Interactive Advertising Bureau of Canada.
Okay.
Has been around since 1997, so since the whole shebang started.
Yeah.
And it's changed, right? So, back then there was a need to have an organization that would be the cheerleader for digital advertising. People, were unsure of it. They, the sophistication wasn't there yet. It was uncharted territory. There were no standard ad units, that type of thing. So the IAB did a lot of heavy lifting on getting people online, showing them what the opportunities were, and also creating sort of a frictionless environment where people could trade on ad units that were standardized so that you didn't have to build 17 billion different iterations for wherever you wanted to advertise.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so does this organization exist for, say, like TV and radio and print?
Yeah, so it's a standard. It's a trade organization for sure. So for TV, you'd have like Think TV. For out of home, you'd have Comb. So, and then there's the Newspaper Association. So these are all organizations that support their various media.
Wow, that is amazing. And so for organizations like Google and Facebook and all those other ad platforms that are there, Bing, let's not forget about Bing. What is your role and kind of what's your relationship with, say, those three companies as mentioned?
Yeah, so IAB currently, we have around 250 members and, certainly the brands that you've mentioned, but we represent on the whole around 80% of the online advertising industry in Canada, and in terms of revenue. And our relationship, the things that we provide to the industry now, and, whereas back in 97 and early 2000s, we were very much a cheerleader. At the moment, the job is very much about policy. It's about the changing, environment from a regulatory standpoint internationally. So we've seen sort of the borders slip away. A lot of the organizations that we represent also are in that same boat where they are global organizations and they need to have standards that are, interoperable, that translate well across various markets, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So we do a lot of policy work. We advocate with the Government of Canada. We do a lot of technical work. So as an example, one of the recent projects, one of my favorite pet projects, is the support of the domestic publishers. Mm-hmm. So the Canadian domestic publishers have taken a real hit over the past years, especially just recently during COVID-19, where we saw a 47% increase in people relying on the news, right? So impression levels soaring. But at the same time, brands kind of, shying away from advertising against anything that was hard to watch, hard to read, and so as a result, that huge surge in audience went unmonetized. So IAB is working really hard right now to support the domestic publishers by creating technical capabilities and again, reducing some of that friction to do trade with domestic publishers in a safe environment.
It's amazing. So what would that look like for like Glacier or Post Media type of thing, or like the Globe and Mail?
Yeah, so these are exactly who we're servicing right now, and one of the projects that we worked on was the creation of an allow list. So this was basically a database of all of the domestic media news sites.
Hmm.
So in every single market, right? So
Yep.
from Aurelia to Calgary to every single market in Canada,
Yep.
creating a comprehensive list of all of these domains and along with all other details around them, like how you can buy them, who reps them, and all that sort of stuff, and then putting that into a centralized, technically sort of accessible and trusted environment, so
Nice.
that so that ad tech providers can access it and
Wow.
marketers can advertise against it. So as an example, right now we're in an election cycle in the US. People may shy away from advertising against the news and therefore throw away the baby with the bathwater,
Hmm.
right? So that means that most advertisers are trying to stay away from any sort of a challenging kind of news environment or anything that is polarizing. And right now, the Canadian press needs to be protected against that, right? So this allows people to, if they want to block news as a category, they still have an option to allow and flip on the switch for Canadian news sources so that you're still supporting your local news and your domestic media.
So bringing it down to like kind of a in the weeds level. So my aunt has a cat sweater company, and she wants to advertise across Canada, and so she can go to this website and say, hey, I want to advertise on all these Canadian news websites because it's a great place to advertise. I don't want to just advertise on Facebook and Google, but I'll go to this website that you've created and say I'm going to bid $20,000 or $200,000, and then will you guys place it, or is it just kind of like you're the eHarmony and connect people on that site?
Well, if your aunt has $200,000 to spend in online media, then
Yes.
it's probably a dog sweater company. So, um, so I guess what we're getting into the weeds. Okay, you touch a really interesting subject here, because while we're doing this, there's
Yeah.
also a concurrent effort to create these self-serve platforms.
Yeah.
So whereas most of the small to medium-sized businesses at the moment can only go on to some of the global platforms because it's so easy, right? So they log in, create an account, put their credit card in there, and then they advertise, their dog sweaters. And
And this is what you're talking about with Facebook and Google, because it's
that's
just so
right.
easy to advertise there.
That,
Yeah, so
exactly.
easy.
Exactly. And so now there's been some really great innovation coming into the market where you see things like the Maple Network that is creating these self-serve platforms for domestic publishers. So the small to
Nice.
medium-sized businesses are going to be able to have access, and they're going to be able to say, yeah, I do want to advertise only in these specific areas, and I want to advertise in Canadian press to support our Canadian publishers.
Wow.
So and so that's one thing that is that we're really excited about. And the other thing is that there was a concerted effort out of Quebec
Hmm.
recently that was called No Media Locaux. And that
Hmm.
was a consortium that was created, by M32 and partners to create a database for Quebec media sources, so that
Amazing.
yeah, so it was like a directory product, and what they've done is they have now bequeathed, if you will, that
Yeah.
product to IAB, so that
Which
we're
which is
taking over.
incredible.
Yeah,
And
so
are
we're
you guys in charge of the Maple Network as well? Is that your baby? Did you
no,
guys create
that's
that?
not our baby. So
Oh,
that's
okay.
that's a that's a consortium of the publishers, the domestic publishers,
Okay.
that will most likely, so this is where it all sort of comes together, that will they'll benefit from the work that we're doing behind the scenes on the tech side. So as we start to
Oh,
develop
okay.
more databases and more places for people to identify themselves as Canadian, they're going to be able to access that inventory into that network, into the Maple network.
Okay. So, but in the meantime, if I'm a brand and I'm like, man, I don't want to just do the big three, right? I don't want to just support Bing, Google, and Facebook. I can go to Maple Network and start spending my money on Canadian news publications versus going to my kind of one-off Black Press, Glacier Press rep and
Yep.
buying kind of one-off publications. Maple does it all.
Yeah, you could, well, they don't do it all because they don't have all of the publications yet,
Okay,
but they're
okay.
working on it. And so you can use the Maple Network, but also if you're working with an agency,
Yeah.
then you talk to the agency about the fact that you might want to block the news category, but you want to enable or greenlight the Canadian domestic news list from the IAB Tech Lab.
And this is when it comes to display ads and remarketing ads,
That's
correct?
right. That's right.
Okay, okay. Very, very cool. And so as far as kind of display networks, there's lots of options these days, right? And there's so many buying desks that it can get very confusing. And and Glacier even offers that, or Postmedia offers a buying display network. We, for some reason, have always just gone with Google's display network, kind of one of the OGs in the display network world of things. What's your role with the display networks in Canada? Is it also trying to hold them accountable to kind of reporting and compliance and kind of transparency?
Yeah, I mean, really, what we do is we work on several levels, right? Like so, an example of how we help the display network
Yeah.
from a let's look at a policy as
Yeah.
an example, the elections in 2019 when we had the Canadian election cycle. There was an amendment to the Canada Elections Act,
Yeah.
which was suddenly any sort of an issue advertisement
Yeah.
that had to do with a political party's platform became categorized as a political ad.
Yeah.
So you can imagine, the impact of that. So just to sort of explain that a little bit more, if you were a non-for-profit
Yeah.
who was talking about the environment,
Yeah.
and the environment is squarely on a campaign platform, suddenly that ad would have to be registered
Yeah.
as a political advertisement
Yeah.
and identified and treated as such. And so what we did was, there was a couple of things that happened there. So Google was one of the first, but then there was a long line after them that announced that they would no longer support political advertising
Yeah.
in Canada. And in order for them to make that true, they needed to be able to, before it hits their network, identify whether or not it was an issue ad.
Yeah.
So what IAB did was we partnered with the Canadian Press and came up with an AI solution that would allow us to, like in real time, identify what the campaign issues were going to be. Then we created a list of sort of keywords and taxonomies around what areas would be affected, and then allowed people to subscribe to that list so that they knew not to advertise against those words because their ads would get taken down, or they just simply wouldn't go through the networks.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's one of those things that doesn't get a lot of publicity, but
No.
it's the stuff behind the scenes that actually keeps the lights on. And
Or,
online.
or we've done political ads a few times now over the years. And this last year, in order to run a political ad, I had to register my Facebook ad account and send in like my passport and like a blood sample and a hair sample and for Facebook, not that stuff. But Facebook, it took it really intensely about like, if you're going to run a political ad, we don't know that you're really a Canadian citizen and you got to prove it.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Like so there's, I mean, that's kind of one of the areas, but then we do a lot of other work, right? Around we do a lot of education and, the sort of the table stakes around promoting the use of online advertising. And then we do a lot of work around privacy. And now that the cookies are going away, we're doing a lot of work on that front.
No more cookies. What are we going to do without cookies?
What are we going to do? I mean, honestly, the cookie monster is freaking out. So yeah, there's a lot of work that's being done on that, and that stuff is international, right? So
No,
again, we
wow.
broach the subject of like, okay, well, we're not in this alone, and we have to figure this out in lockstep with all of the other markets, and a solution in Canada just doesn't work in isolation. Similar to other issues like fraud. Right? Like coming up with a fraud solution that only works in Canada seems a little obtuse, right? When you know that, it's a borderless environment.
Yeah.
So
speaking of cookies, Starbucks had this really great cookie where they alerted me that they had cookies. And I said, okay, yes, I'm okay. You have cookies. And then an ad popped up says, would you like a real cookie? And it says, order it now. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Such a great campaign, actually. Yeah. Really smart.
across Canada, all these marketers are listening right now, and marketing directors and business owners and folks that are working agency side, brand side. Are they kind of people you want to become members? Because you only have 250 members, which doesn't seem like a lot for such a world that's so huge.
Well, we're getting more every day.
Okay.
And one trend that we're seeing is we're seeing a lot more direct to consumer brands coming in.
Okay,
So,
amazing.
yeah, so over the past few years, I think it was like 2017 that IAB started tracking the top 200 direct to consumer brands in North America. And we did that with Dun& Bradstreet out of the US. And so this is a sector that is so fascinating to us, and obviously super important because of the fact that the direct to consumer brands are the ones who have really nailed first party data. And as we work to reimagine the cookieless world, those they're the ones who are going to be calling the shots on a lot of this sort of reimagination, because it's going to be their data that needs to get mobilized into this reimagined ecosystem, right? So if you can't rely on third-party cookies anymore, and you're an advertiser and you have this store of email addresses or of other identifiers, and you've got your data management platforms that have all sorts of other attributes and segmentation attached to them, you're going to want to leverage that first-party data into the ecosystem in a way that is sustainable, that is, compliant with international privacy regulation and all that sort of stuff. So, so we've seen definitely an increase in the amounts of direct to consumer brands joining the IAB. HelloFresh, we've got Well.ca, Majuri, so
That's
lots of really
awesome.
great brands. Yeah.
And why should marketers join? Give me like your elevator. We're in an elevator together. We have our masks on. We're safely distanced. But why should I join as a marketer?
Well, I think that you should join as a marketer to get ahead of what's actually happening, so that you're not sort of, behind the curve on some of the issues that are going to impact your business pretty significantly in the coming years. We see things like, the GDPR hit our radar in early 2017. We were up in arms about it. IAB Canada was up in arms about this because we knew that this was going to impact us at some point. So we had like webinars, we did everything. We had like even the floaty, the car guy.
Yeah.
Right. And we got 5 people to dial in, on the first calls about the GDPR and how this would impact you. Fast forward to like the day before GDPR actually takes effect in May 2018, hundreds of people are dialing in, and they're like, wait, what's happening? Like, does this affect us in any way? So I think that there's a couple of things. One is, we know that marketers are really busy.
Yes.
And that they can't keep track of every single issue that is out there. But the message that we have for them is, we're not gonna spam you with information that's irrelevant. That's A. And B is that we promise to get you ahead of some of these issues to prevent some of the fallout that could possibly happen, right? So
maybe to flip the question, if I don't become a member, do I not get this information from you guys?
Well, you're going to get it through people who are, through probably secondary, tertiary parties that are not as on the ground on actually cracking the problems, right? So you, and this is evidenced, time and time again, where we're talking about direct to consumer brands 3 years ago, and then you hear other, trade bodies saying, oh, by the way, direct to consumer brands are now a thing. And it's like, okay, we tend to be ahead of this because of the fact that there's so much attached to data and technology, right? So we look for trends that are going to impact the ecosystem way ahead of the curve. Whereas a lot of the other organizations are focused on content,
Yes.
right? Which is also obviously really
Yes.
important.
Yeah.
Messaging, branding, all that sort of stuff, best practices, and
Yeah.
and that type of thing. So for us, it's more about being in the weeds and then being able to sort of like package that up and inform you in a way that's important and relevant.
So this show goes live. People are listening. Member 251 joins.
Yeah.
She's getting member exclusive emails, member exclusive webinars, member only experiences and knowledge that no one else is going to get. Would that be
Yeah.
correct?
I'll give you
And they're
another
supporting an
example.
organization that's helping others.
Yeah,
That's
for
helping
sure.
the
Oh,
industry. Yeah. On top
100%.
of it. On top of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I think another just a case in point was it was a sunny July afternoon
Yeah.
when my phone started ringing and people were like, "What are we going to do about Facebook?"
Yeah.
Right?
Oh
And
yeah.
so we had like all of our members calling and saying, "Should we boycott? Shouldn't we?" Like
Yeah.
the agencies, like we have a
Yeah.
lot of agencies, and so our go-to was not to come up with some sort of a I don't know, like a decision. We're not in support of any boycotts of any kind.
Because
So,
Facebook is your member as well, correct?
well, Facebook is our member, but not only that, but our mandate is it goes against squarely against our mandate. So, but what we did do was because of the fact that we have really, sort of on the ground connections, we very quickly created a roundtable for all of our marketing members and shared it with also some other trade organizations, a roundtable discussion with the Facebook policy team from
Yes.
Washington
Yeah.
to inform them about, what was happening, what was actually like taking place so that they could make an informed decision about whether or not they were going to move forward with their boycott. And like, that was the thing where we had, I think, a 24-hour notice and we got 260 people dialing in.
Wow.
And one of them recorded it and then it went to CNN and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it was just like
Wow.
yeah, it was crazy. But like, it's those kinds of things where, it's access to the right conversations and also the right information that is going to help you make good decisions.
So when we talk about interactive advertising, the list would be is like Facebook, Google, display networks. Would email marketing be in that, or is that not really advertising? That's
Sure, sure. Email marketing would be part of it. I think that the more exciting areas that, we've been covering a lot over the recent, months has been, the connected television. So, the idea of OTT and that type of thing. Next week, we're doing a 2-day event about audio, and audio.
and just to jump back to OTT, what does OTT stand for those that?
OTT is over the top. So this is your Apple TV. This is your, using an external device to access app-based broadcasting,
That's
right?
me. That's how I access all my TV is my Apple TV.
I'll tell you, I mean, you're not
Yeah.
alone, right? Like,
Yeah. Oh
so
yeah.
this is all digital. And, when you, especially again during COVID,
Oh yeah.
when you talk to some of the media buyer side, especially the agencies that are more agile and on the ground working on this stuff, they moved a lot of their linear television towards advanced TV because of the fact that it was more flexible. They're able to turn it on, turn it off as needed, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So the amount of flexibility that is now being integrated from digital into some of these more traditional advertising, like digital out of home is another great example. These are all becoming digitized platforms that are
Yeah.
going to take some of the best of digital combined with their powerhouse capabilities that were traditionally always available.
So okay, so here's the question, and I'm gonna jump into audio after this because I'm so excited about that and what you're doing with podcast ads because that's a whole another world.
Yeah.
Okay, explain it. You know the term "explain it to me like I'm five." Have you heard that
Okay.
term? It's like a subreddit on it's a subreddit. It's just explain things in a simple manner. How do in Canada those the powers that be track to see how often and how much like my parents' house who has cable TV? How do they know how much TV my parents watch?
Oh, okay. So you're talking about like a panel, like a ratings, that type of thing?
Yeah, because I get these reports from like Bell and different groups being like, this is how much TV was watched, or these surveys. And I'm like, how do you know? Or how do they know? Like, there's this morning
Okay.
show that my son and I love on radio in the morning, and we listen to it on the way to school. It's on like the whatever top 40 radio station. We have three of them in Vancouver, and it's an amazing quiz game. We do the quiz game, and then I change it to CBC. after I drop out. But do they know that? Do they have these devices? Do they have like boxes
Yeah, it
somewhere?
depends on the devices that you're using, right? So much like you would look at your phone and you get a report card on how much time you've spent on your device.
Yeah.
There's that, and there's also carrier data, right? So as an example, when you log into an OTT device, right, like an over-the-top device, you'll notice that let's at CNN,
Yeah.
in order for you to access that app, they're going to ask you who's your carrier, right?
So they
By
don't. So
what
I got the CBC app. They don't ask about carrier. My CTV when they don't. My global they don't. None of them have ever asked me about my carrier.
They've never asked you about your carrier.
They
This is
want me to. They want me to ask for my carrier if I want like enhanced TV, but if I would just want to watch like ones that were on in the last, if I want more than what was in the 3 weeks prior to what I'm watching. So if I want to watch the latest episode of Great British Bake Off, I can
Mhm.
just log into the app and it's there. But if I
So
want to
you've
watch,
logged in, but you've logged in,
or I've
right?
opened it, sorry, I've opened the app up and it's come up for
Yeah,
me.
but so that's kind of what you're. Yeah, I get what you're saying. So this is the use of deterministic data, and we call it deterministic data because it's a persistent login,
Yeah.
right? So as you've logged in, they are able to the powers that be are able to measure the session with the ID. And
Also,
this
if I
is
open the app, they connect the app to my Apple ID on my Apple device.
that's right.
Okay,
That's
and then
right.
what about my parents who have cable television? Does like Delta Cable and Shaw Cable feed that information to those TV
Mm,
folks?
no, not currently. That is, I mean, that depends on household by household, but most of the data that comes out of traditional linear TV is still
Yeah.
panel based, right? Where it's not actually, unless they have a smart TV, right?
No,
And
no,
so
they just use regular cable, like
yeah.
old school. They're
So
keeping it
if they
real.
have, yeah. So if it's just a regular cable,
Yeah.
then it's usually the measurement is done through traditional sort of the old school panel based. So, but
And
that's all.
what is the panel base? What is that?
So panel based is basically doing, the old school rotating panels of certain clusters of hundreds of thousands of people who have either devices
Yeah.
that are and logs, right? Like so, you're doing diaries in some cases where you're actually logging, what your viewing habits have been over
Okay,
the
so but not
that
my parents. But there's people like my parents who have volunteered to do it or
correct.
paid to
And
do
so
it.
there's samples, right? So there's
Okay.
representative samples that act.
I want to meet one of these people. I want to see this. I'm so curious about because I'm like,
Too.
but they're the ones that feed because I get these data reports as an agency and they're like, buy more TV ads because everyone's watching TV. But I'm like, I'm trying to figure out how they know this, and I've
Totally.
never gotten a clear answer.
Yeah, well, so like I'm going to date myself here, but like, back when
Yeah.
telemarketing was still a thing,
Yes, yes.
right? Did you ever get a call from somebody who is like, I just
Ipsis
want to
Reed.
ask you a few questions?
The Ipsis Reed guys, right? Angus Reed did his
Yeah.
thing, and yeah,
I want to
yeah,
ask you some questions, right?
yes,
And then they start with, are you in marketing? And then you say yes, and then they hang up on you,
yes,
right?
every time. Yes, yes.
Exactly. So that's why you're never going to see one of those devices because you're too biased and you're too in it.
Okay, but I want to meet like none of my relatives ever had one, none of my friends or family. I want to track someone down. And then on the radio side though, because here's the thing, I actually like the radio in my car. Like I also like podcasting, but if I don't have like if I'm doing a short drive here in the suburbs, I'll put on the radio. So how do they
Yeah.
know if I'm listening to the radio? That's what I want to know.
Well,
Is
what
there
kind of radio are you listening? Are you listening to local radio or are you listening like FM or AM? Like you're
both
listening?
FM and AM? Yeah, both. Like
Yeah, yeah.
AM 1130 or yeah,
Same,
yeah.
yeah, same deal. It's the same, and that's largely still driven by demographic information. But as it becomes more digitized, here's the cool thing about that is that
But staying on the traditional though, so is there people that have been given little logbooks that they have to
I'm
manually
not
fill
sure
out?
how it works. I'm not sure how whether it's different for radio than it is for
Okay.
TV. But I will tell you this though, what's really interesting about the capabilities when you think about it, right? Like
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so now we've 20 years into digital media,
Yeah.
and you had a lot of the radio stations offer online internet-based radio,
Oh,
right?
like they're always advertising iHeartRadio, but I'm like, why would I download an app that
Right.
advertises to me when I could
Right,
just
but
download
not
Spotify?
necessarily. Yeah, yeah. So there's some massaging that needs to get done there. But like,
Yes.
imagine like your favorite radio station, and it's 2007. We're back in 2007.
Yes. Yeah.
And you're like, you know what? Like, I wonder if my radio station is available on my laptop. So
Oh,
I'm going
and they totally are. Every website, yeah, their website would have
to
it live. I would do that sometimes.
so when you think about that and you look at the data that is now available to those radio stations based on who you are and how
Yeah.
you've logged in and where you've
Yeah.
logged in from, all of that information can become extrapolated and
Which
applied to.
which is the future is amazing. Like your role and IABC's role in this is so crucial and so important right now. But I'm just trying to think of like kind of like I want to know about your history, like your grandma. I want to know about your grandma before we talk about today, because it's like what you're doing right now is so crucial and so important. But I was like, I'm curious to know, like, there's still people like that your peers are still sending out information, but I want to know how they're doing it. And so it sounds like it's still pretty manual, like little logbooks, pieces of paper.
Yeah, but it's changing, right? Like so, and that's changing because things are becoming obsolete, and we're all sort of upgrading. We want lighter stuff. We don't want albums of CDs anymore. We want to have things stored in our hard drives or on a cloud, right? Like so, as things become sort of cloud based, that's just the way the way that the world is moving.
But at the
Right.
same time, like there's so many people like my parents that will never get rid of their cable TV. And they don't want, like, I was like trying to get them to adopt an Apple TV, and like there's no way they're gonna change it. And our client, like Lazy Boy Furniture, they market to this demographic that loves cable television, right?
Right.
And will listen to the radio in the car. So I'm just like,
Yeah.
that's why I'm just curious about that.
Well,
But
look at
okay,
Warren Buffett. Look at Warren Buffett with his flip phone, right?
oh
Like
yeah,
I envy the guy,
oh
right?
yeah.
Like, I mean, he seems pretty happy to me.
Okay, so one goal from this, Sonia, is you or I, we need to figure out, I'm going to find out like what that booklet looks like for TV tracking and what the radio tracker machine looks like. Like, and is it a machine? Is it on my radio or not?
Let's find one. Let's
Right?
do that. Yes,
Right? Because
totally.
it must exist if that's the model.
I definitely want to do.
Okay.
And then we do a fireside chat with the individual
Okay. Yes.
who has it in his
Yes.
possession or her possession.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, and this is the reason
Yeah.
I'm so excited about that history, is that we're living in a time now with podcasts. So we've had a podcast for the last 5 years, and most people are like, it's kind of like when someone told me once, it's like when they introduced the radio, right? And said, oh yeah, there's a lot of people listening to it. It's like, well, how do we know? And the podcast, I know how many people listen to it. Actually, it's embarrassing. I know sometimes what episodes don't get listened to very much, or when they drop off when they listen, right? So it's pretty intense, the data we get. But I'm curious, how are you monitoring and helping hold podcasts accountable in this new era where all these brands like ND and Squarespace are trying to advertise on podcasts at the moment? And is that a form of interactive advertising?
Yeah, I mean, sure. Audio advertising is sits squarely on the digital advertising offering right now, and what makes it particularly exciting is the fact that there's such a long tail of contextual advertising that's available through podcasting, because you can get so hyper specific on different topic areas, and all of the amazing data that's available, through traditional digital means is now.
Yeah.
Applied to the podcast world, right? Like to right down to the episode, to the content that's being discussed. So yeah, I think that audio is, and also just the theater of the mind, right? The ability to play with the theater of the mind and context in such a beautiful, elegant way is just. I'm so excited about audio advertising, and there's players. Some of our members, Triton Digital, as an example, are working on how to monetize in a responsible way, and creating, the drop-in sort of insertions where you can do advertising units. And then there's also the more traditional means that you're, obviously familiar with, that are, sponsored, much like an old sort of DJ model where you're
host read. Yeah.
Exactly. And there's all
Thank you.
sorts.
This show is brought to you by Insight Magazine. Thank you, Canada Post. Thank you for sponsoring our show.
Where can I get my own copy? Right. So yes, it's very effective, and and you're able to take on the personality of the actual the host and the environment, which is a form of, I think, like a quite sophisticated influencer advertising, in the way that you can measure by audiences. I think that there's also less gaming of the system available because the level of engagement, it's there for all to see. It's either been listened to or it hasn't, right? The ad unit, from a programmatic standpoint, like the automated version of this,
which we do not do. We get pitched this all the time because we have to switch our hosts to a compliant host. Which, do you know much about the compliant host now? They're trying to say, unless you're with this type of host that manages your listenership, they won't sell ads for you where they insert the ads in the pre-roll, mid-roll, end roll, and they would automate it.
Yeah, and I think that's audience based, right? Like, so, and that's kind of, you might see that changing, right? Because everybody's after scale and after different sort of, unless you're running a network that has scale en masse.
Yes.
If you remember the way blogs took off, it was like network based, right? It was like, oh, this is easy. This is like a Google product that I can just sort of like, blog.com or whatever, and everybody gets access. Well, then lo and behold, you have the we didn't know it at the time, but that was the GDN in the making. Right. So that was kind of like, okay, well, this is a network approach to delivering content on a mass scale, by individuals.
Or remember called Google AdSense at the time when you would create a blogger account? Like that was your, and so I had a blog up on blogger.com, which is Google's blog platform. And they would give me AdSense credit depending on how many visitors came to my site if I put up some AdSense display pieces.
That's right. So, I mean, and that was the network effect. And so that's where, the podcasts are kind of following a similar trajectory, probably having learned a lot from, the do's and don'ts of the blogosphere, or whatever you want to call it, and sort of, taking the best and leaving the rest. Right. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity still that's untapped on the podcasting side and the monetization and the networking effect of it. But some of the bigger players, like Spotify, like some of the platforms are just doing outrageously innovative stuff, right? Like
really cool. Yeah, Spotify bought the host that I'm on, so I'm on Anchor.fm, and Spotify bought it because they're like, we want to host, and it's amazing how Anchor is free, and every time you upload your podcast to it, it goes to all 11 podcast channels, the majors.
It's fantastic.
So what is going back to IAB's role in that world? What are you guys doing for like helping advertisers or helping people that have podcasts to manage the ads?
Well, again, as evidenced by the event, the 2-day event that we're doing this coming week, we're educating, we're talking to people about how it works. We're talking to people about the standard ad units that are available. We're trying to ensure that we don't sort of, every time there's a new medium, I don't know, have you ever seen the movie The Gods Must Be Crazy?
Yes. Oh, I love that movie.
Okay. Yeah. So, like it's like every new medium is like the Coke bottle, right?
Yes. Oh, totally. That's why I like to look at our history. So is there a standard ad unit for podcasts right now that you guys have come up with?
There are standard ad units. Yeah. So there are standard ad units that are available. And there's also the reason why there have to be standards for several reasons, right? Like, so there's security, there's measurement, there's compliance. So you have to make sure that there's no malware. So there's all sorts of different standards that are available. And then also for frictionless buying, if you're going to buy it over a programmatic network, then you're going to want to make sure that you know what the unit sizes are and all that sort of stuff. But I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but just recently, actually, like something's been going on with my OTT where the quality of the ads is completely different from the quality of the actual streaming, right? So you'll get like the streaming of whatever show you're watching, and then all of a sudden an ad will come on, and the volume level is like 17 times higher.
It's the same ad 4 times in a row, and it's so annoying. I actually want, like, CTV. We were watching The Amazing Race Canada. And because we hadn't logged in, we just downloaded the app on our Apple TV, and they kept playing the same ads. And I eventually just got annoyed by the company that was advertising, and I was like, screw it. We bought it on iTunes. We bought the season, and we're like, I was happy to support CTV and let's watch their ads and be one of their, data points, but we were like, we can't handle it.
That's why we need standards. So you've
Okay.
basically you've experienced like the firsthand why it is that we actually, put these things in place. So that because nobody wants that, and the more that happens, the less likely you are to monetize, and the more likely you're gonna see people that are kind of falling away from your. Like right now, I'm watching English programming on an app on my OTT, and I'm getting French ads.
Oh
Right?
no.
So
So
like
do you
loud French ads.
who do you complain to, or who do you tell? Like I've told guys, like I told a guy at Bell one time, I was like, dude, you got to know this about your ad placements. And he's like,
Yeah.
oh, we should fix that one day. And he's like, ho ho ho.
Yeah.
He goes, so and I was like, no, dude, I was like, I left your platform because it was so annoying.
Yeah. So one of the things that the IAB is really good at is community. So while we have 250 sort of organization members, we have
Yeah.
tens of thousands of people that are attached to that, right? So, and we have a very robust ad ops community that communicates with one another, and you'll see that they also communicate on Facebook. So the one of the things that we've always done at IAB is that if you see something, say something. You go
Yeah.
to our network, and then the ad ops people are like, who manages, X brand?
Yep.
And then that person is informed, and then they quickly make the change so that the client doesn't have to,
Oh,
endure, a prolonged sort of, mess up on their
yeah.
media buy, right?
Yeah.
So, and there's various players. To answer your question, there's various people that would be responsible for that, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's the
Okay.
broadcaster,
Yeah.
whether it's some sort of a third party, whether it's the agency that
Yeah.
misplaced the ad,
Yeah.
right? So it all boils down to the ad operations individual that was responsible for actually like putting the ad onto the airwave,
Oh.
right?
Um, so many amazing things. I love this discussion. I need to know you personally. What are some like books, e-newsletters, podcasts? Kind of where do you go for inspiration and ideas personally?
So you know what, like I actually try to stay like I minimize my
Yeah.
exposure to social media,
Yes.
which
Yes.
is something that I think it's my like more intense recently, just because
Yeah.
I think that there's just so much going on, and
Yeah.
we have to focus on on progress, and I'm also I'm a yoga teacher and a meditation teacher on the
Oh,
side. So
incredible.
yeah, so I spend a lot of time reading like, crazy stuff, like not crazy, but like just,
Yeah.
studying Upanishads and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the books that I'm more drawn to now
Yeah.
are, from a more sort of grounded business perspective, are things that are to do with like the economy. Like I'm reading things
Yeah.
like the Donut Economics, which I think is a super important book, and also I'm fascinated by biomimicry, which is like using 3 billion years of science and biology to leverage that into innovation and technology, right?
Amazing.
Like, and watching animals like the shark's paintbrush, which
Yeah.
is like such a great book, and Atomic Habits. So,
Yeah.
like, just
That's a
really,
great one.
like, really important sort of, books that inspire you to think differently
Yep.
about things, so
Oh,
that you're not
awesome.
sort of being echo chambered into this polar, like, programmatic bad, good, privacy good,
Yeah.
bad. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I think it's really important to take a step back once in a while, and to just, of course, stay informed,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and be in touch with the industry, but really important to feed your sort of your intuitive senses, and make sure that you're on a diet, like a proper media diet, a balanced
Yeah.
diet of
Yes.
media.
I like that. I'm trying to pull this up. I'm looking at my meditation. The Calm app I love. There's one called Soul Time. I've got Abide, and then
Awesome.
Praise You Go. Yeah, Praise You Go is one I really like doing in the morning. So again, it kind of seems counterintuitive to have an app to help you meditate, but I'm really thankful for some of these apps that are just getting people to kind of dip their toe in the meditation world.
Even just the intention of having downloaded it
Yes. Yeah.
goes
Yeah. Yeah.
goes miles, right? Like, so, taking time for yourself, and I've been spending a lot more time outside as well.
Yeah.
Some of the blessings of the social distancing have allowed us to maybe reflect a little bit more, and spend some time. I like to get out into the forest, and just kind of hang around,
Yeah.
hang out.
Cool.
So So yeah, and and then in terms of staying up to date with the industry, I'm blessed with an organization that allows me to speak to people literally 10 hours or 11 hours a day,
Wow.
just about the latest innovations of what's happening.
Yeah.
So that combination works well, where you can just sort of turn, like in yoga, you turn it on and then you turn it off, and
Yeah.
you digest and you kind of think about the information you've been given, and kind of go from there.
Amazing.
Helps with a perspective on the future as well, and for you to keep positive.
Yeah. I think really this needs a part two. This has been fascinating, and we have some homework to do. You and I, we're going to find those people that
Yes.
are radio and TV trackers.
Yes.
I'm going to check out this Maple Network because this sounds amazing. And even us, we do a lot of media buying and advertising in traditional media, so maybe that can become a really efficient tool for us.
Yeah.
And lastly, those that want to become members, go to IAB Canada. It's amazing. Depending on the size of your organization, how many staff you have, that sort of thing, kind of revenue, that's your membership fees for the year. Two things are happening. One, you're supporting an amazing organization who's doing a ton of work with our government, with policy, with education, and you get incredible member-only insights, member-only exclusives, and I think this is a great investment for anyone who is doing anything to do with online advertising. So, Sonia, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Darian. This has been a lot of fun.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Thanks everyone for coming this week to Marketing Jam, and we'll see you next week on the Jam.
Thanks for listening to Marketing News Canada. For more episodes and other great stories from Canadian marketers, visit marketingnewscanada.com. All episodes are recorded at the Jelly Marketing Studio, thanks to our producer, Chris Penner, and editor, Travis Jeffers.